Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Katie Everett. I'm the executive director of the Lynch Foundation, which is a family foundation in Boston. It's been around for 35 years. And I've been with the family for 28 years. And over those last two to three decades, we have evolved pretty significantly. We started as a $10 million fund. We're about a $140 million fund. We traditionally had invested in 4 areas, which were education, health and wellness, historic and cultural preservation, and religious and educational efforts of the Roman Catholic Church. A few years ago, we brought on the second generation, which wanted to increase and expand in their area of investments, and decided to go in to look into investing in housing. Commonwealth of Mass was facing significant housing crises, and so the family voted to invest in housing. And as we began to think about how we would make an impact there, considering that we are a small family foundation, we have 2 staff, we have modest assets, and it costs about $1 million to create 1 unit of housing in the city of Boston, we knew that we were going to have to use our experience and expertise, which really was around our tenure around leadership, our deep relationships within the city and within the Catholic Church, and our ability to identify opportunities to create the greatest leverage. So the foundation's founded by Peter Lynch, who's, where he's all about the leverage. So this is sort of like I'm just giving you a little background on where we were headed as a foundation. We had already known, with all of our decades of work in the Catholic Church and the Catholic schools, most specifically, that we had experienced significant school closures, and knew that there was a lot of real estate and a lot of land that never was really repurposed. It was underutilized, but no one really knew who owned it. Was it the diocese? Was it the parish? Was it the religious order? And we had always had heard the fact or data that the Catholic Church was the largest non-governmental landowner in the world. With that in mind, and with our new struggle to understand who owns what, we went into a partnership with NACA, which is the largest non-profit mortgage lender in the country, to work with the Lincoln Institute to determine and use their data set on who owns America. And we finished that project, and we got to see specifically in Massachusetts what the ownership was and represented, and who represented the owners in the state of Massachusetts. And seeing how powerful that data was, we asked the researchers if they could come up with a new, a new program to determine what was owned by faith-based organizations for the state of Massachusetts. Like, where was all the ownership? What was owned by the Catholic Church, Jewish congregations? We wanted to understand and get a knowledge of what was available. Was there an opportunity for faith-based organizations to come together to address the housing crisis in Massachusetts? Is there an opportunity to review the existing zoning laws, or do we need to think about a YIGB strategy here in Massachusetts? And then could we layer it on with, in Massachusetts, we just passed the first housing bill we had ever seen in the Commonwealth in 30 years last year. And is there an opportunity to leverage the existing state regulations and financing that's available in Massachusetts? Could we leverage all that knowledge and data? And is there an opportunity for faith-based organizations to play a role in transforming and providing affordable housing, or housing in general, across Massachusetts? So Reina, who you'll hear from in a minute, created this incredible data set, and we knew as a 2-person staff at the foundation that we would need additional capacity. So we went into partnership with the Corcoran Center of Real Estate at Boston College. We had students disseminate all the data that was created, and what we ended up finding was about 2,000 parcels totaling over 2 million square feet valued at about $4.5 billion just in Massachusetts alone for faith-based communities. I'm going to let Reina explain to you what that data looks like, how we utilized it, and how you could potentially bring this to your diocese.
Thanks, Katie. Oh, you can keep it.
You don't want to.
I'll use this part because I gotta do the demo. Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much. And so, as Katie mentioned, I'm Reina, and I'm an associate director with the Center for Geospatial Solutions. And we are a service arm of the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, which is another family foundation. And as a service center in a nonprofit, we see ourselves as serving as data navigators for the common good. And we work primarily with our colleagues at Lincoln, as well as with other nonprofits, foundations, and a lot of government agencies at all levels. Within Lincoln, the project that I run is called Who Owns America? That is my primary portfolio, let's say. And that is an approach that we've developed over the past few years that standardizes and enriches parcel-level data nationwide. Now, parcel data is collected at the county level, and oftentimes when we start and do projects, it's instinctual, we always will go directly to that local data source. What we're trying to do is essentially create a standardized nationwide data set. We partner with Regrid, Atom, and Open Corporates. We've taken their data, we do a significant amount of data munging and cleaning and standardizing of mailing addresses, site addresses, as well as owner names. And so what we do is we create these snapshots in time of ownership types. And so this includes owner-occupied as well as likely owner-occupied, but it also includes categories like in-state corporate owned, and within in-state corporate owned, in-state multi-property corporate owned. So we're looking at the extent of property ownership of a single corporate entity, by which I mean, do they own one property in your community, or do they own 25, 100, et cetera? We also, thanks to our partnership with Open Corporates, now have access to subsidiary and branch data, so we are starting to link through LLCs and tracing them back to their parent company. So for example, with Blackstone or Invitation Homes, we are able to see that, you know, some of their subsidiaries are named like 123 Arch Street LLC, and we're able to link them back and show that a greater nuanced picture of ownership. So within that, as Katie said, she reached out and asked, you know, your ownership data is great, but can you look specifically at what is likely faith-based owned? And so what we did was we decided to create a faith-based owned or religious organization owned flag in our data set. And what we did was we used a series of keywords as well as a number of different rules and algorithms, everything from Liechtenstein's distance, or also known as fuzzy wuzzy, which is my favorite name for it, as well as cosine and trigrams algorithms, and a lot of regular expressions to essentially identify and winnow down our list of parcels. And by looking at that cleaned owner name, we tried to identify what is likely a faith-based owned organization, parcel, excuse me. And as Katie noted, what we needed to do was create an application that would allow Katie and her partners, as well as the students at Boston College, to be able to easily access this information and go through it quickly. So the key functionality for the app, which I'm going to demo in a second, was that we needed an easy way for students to take the data set of likely faith-based owned parcels in Massachusetts, and we needed them to be able to verify those results. And after talking with the professor at Boston College, we also wanted them to answer some additional quick questions about whether or not, one, confirming that it is owned by a faith-based organization, two, is there developable space, and three, are there buildings other than a building for worship on that parcel. We wanted an additional view so that the supervising faculty member, Professor Neil could essentially review the results and also work with his students. So if they had any questions or concerns, he could work with them and also just sort of review progress as we worked on this together. And then last, we wanted a tab where Katie and her partners could look at the results. And into that, what we love to do with our parcel level data is, as you saw today earlier with the presentation, the preview for the workshop tomorrow, I was really excited to see GIS being shown, by the way. We likewise like to integrate additional information and data, and we not only overlay them, but we actually embed that directly into our parcel data so that we have within each parcel whether or not it falls into a LIHTC qualified opportunity zone, whether it's in a difficult development area, whether it's in a wetlands qualified opportunity zone, et cetera, and onwards. So with that, I'm going to quickly show you the application. So the first page of the application is, again, this was, so two things to know about this project too. From when we started to then when we produced the app for students to start using was about like a 2 to 3 week turnaround time. So because we started talking and the students were getting ready to start their spring semester pretty much like a week or so later, we put together this application. This is the landing page that students would reach when they first came in. So you see some information about the application, a review process, and there are some tutorial videos here for the students when they were doing the review process to use, and just as a refresher in case they got confused about how they were supposed to use the app, et cetera, and onwards. I'm not going to, I will spare you having to watch one of my video tutorials, and we will instead go to the review application process part. Now, all of the data has been classified at this point, but originally, students would come to this application, to this page of the application. You'll see that we initially had about 7,000 parcels that we identified as likely or potentially faith-based organization owned. Each student had an ID. So for example, student 2 had 540 parcels they were responsible for looking at. All the students were also split into teams of 3. So depending on how the students chose to divvy up their work, if they wanted to search by their own individual ID or their team, they could do so. And at this point, all the surveys are completed, but originally, all the points that on the map were actually red. And there was a category here under survey completed for no, so students could use this as a way to go back to check their work or continue onwards. I'm going to just select one of the parcels just because I want to show you what it's going to look like. When you select one of the parcels, you get over here a survey form, and because we know students are going to be working on their laptop computers, everyone's computer is a little different. This monitor is very different in size compared to mine. We also made it so students can expand different views. Likewise, let me do this. They can dock the pop-up over here. So they can see the information, the owner name, they can see the site address, the total square footage, et cetera. They have a survey form that they had to fill out to confirm whether or not it was owned by a faith-based organization, if there appears to be developable space, and if the building is buildings other than one used for worship. They could also add some additional notes, and then they would mark whether or not they had reviewed it. This one, unfortunately, is not showing the Google Street View image, which sometimes happens with some of our parcels. But we also, as much as possible, tried to include a Google Street View so that students could stay within the app. And, oh, let's see if this one will work. Oh, we're not going to have any luck today. That's okay. So students would be able to have Google Street View just directly embedded in here and be able to just stay within the app but quickly review their parcels. As I said earlier, let me go and turn off this filter. Yes, you can search by name. Great question. Sorry? Let's see. I'm going to actually have M.A. I'm going to do something like that first to search. Just let's see. 0 properties. So all the parcel information is coming directly from the tax assessor's offices. So, and...
Sisters, do the congregation.
Yeah.
That's how we sort it.
The Carmelite sisters?
Yeah.
There we go. Let's try Carmelite on their own. Nope. So the fun thing with tax assessor data is, as you can imagine, it is very messy. And so there are, for example, a million ways to spell Roman Catholic Archdiocese. Rocath Arch, Rome Cath Archdiocese with extra E's was one of my favorites that we found. So we are pulling our data from Regrid, which does some standardizing of the parcel data, but then we do some additional cleaning. But the type of cleaning we do would be if LLC is spelled a multitude of different ways, we'll just standardize it. So we don't touch the other parts of the owner name field because we don't want to necessarily change the underlying data set. But here, for example, is Sisters of St. Joseph. And we can see the parcel that was reviewed. And let's see. I think it's probably that house. The triple decker? Yeah, perfect. So this is how a student would basically be able to review the parcel. The review and determinants page was for the faculty member to be able to, for example, during like office hours, if a student had a question, they could work with the student. They could filter by the student ID. So if that particular student was with them in office hours, they could look specifically at that student's responses. They could look also and see like where the students answered no to the first question of, can you confirm this is used by a faith-based organization? And so this was a good way for the faculty member to be able to validate whether or not questions had been answered correctly, and then make changes or make suggestions to their students. They could likewise look at where survey responses had answers where the students said they weren't sure, and so they wanted some additional help. So after all that, from those 7,000 plus parcels, we ended up with 5,881 parcels that students had confirmed were faith-based organization owned. What you have down here is also the total square footage, as well as the estimated total buildable area, which is essentially where we took the total square footage, we subtracted the any building square footage, and we also then did a percent reduction. And the percent reduction varied depending on whether you were in Boston or outside of Boston city limits or outside of that Boston city limits. And then you have the total assessed value summarized there. So that's for faith-based organization parcels. What we wanted to look at were specifically parcels that students said then had developable space. So if you turn that filter on, you see it go down to that number that Katie was showing earlier, 1,973. And within this, you can do some additional fun stuff. You can say that you only want to look at parcels that are in a census-designated urban area, and maybe a federal, let's do LIHTC qualified opportunity zone. And you can also choose a buildable square footage. So if you wanted to look specifically at parcels that are above or below a certain size, you can do so. And if you hit apply, you would start to filter your results further. So what we were trying to do, the intent with these filters is to provide additional ways for the data to be sliced and diced by our partners, for them to be able to answer specific questions they had. So for funsies, let's see here. And within that, you then also have the ability to view this in tabular form. Our partners could also export this data as a CSV file, but we have a lot of information in here. You see we have things like the homestead exemption, the last sale price, last sale date. We have the owner name. So for example, you could do something like owner name contains, and I'm going to do Cath Arch. Actually, I'll just do Arch. Cath will hatch a lot. And we'll say turn on. And what that will do here is filter my map data even further. And let's change what fields I'm looking at over here just to make it a little bit easier to view. Like so. And so suddenly you have all of the parcels that have in the tax assessor data Cath in the name that have been identified by students as, yes, being faith-based owned parcels with potentially developable space. And so this is a way for then, for Katie and her partners to do further analysis and work. And with that, I'll pass it back over to you, Katie. And let me go back to the...
Thanks. So great. So then we get. Oh no, here we go. Oh, sorry. Oh no, that's all right. Okay. So great. We got all the data. We got all the facts. So now, as at the foundation, we're trying to figure out how can we move some of this work forward, knowing that even if there's a YIGBY Act potentially in the state, we're talking several years. And so, we have the Planning Office of Urban Affairs of the Archdiocese of Boston. I don't know if every arch has those or not, but we've had it since 1969. And they have a track record. They've developed over 4,000 units of affordable housing in those years, and have a great track record of, raising and leveraging over millions of dollars in public aid and providing wraparound supportive housing services for decades and decades. One of the recent developments that they're literally working on right now is in Roxbury, where they are, I would say, saving Catherine Drexel Parish in Roxbury and building and supporting, I'm sorry, how many units is it? 200 mixed income using residential units, as well as 11 affordable home ownership units. They're renovating the parish center where they'll have, an early childhood ABC Head Start program. They're doing financial literacy courses. They're going to have, an on-site garden that will actually provide food to their food pantry. They are providing extraordinary revenue and relevance, frankly, to the Catholic Church in Roxbury, which is a predominantly community of color that's been underserved in the city of Boston for generations. And so we have precedent that this can happen, that we can do it, that as a community we can come together and repurpose and create revenue and relevance for our church and live our mission and our faith in a way that is aligned with our belief system. We have additional opportunities where if we collaborated, again, with 3 extraordinary partners that operate already and are serving in our community with decades of track records. Pine Street Inn was founded in also 1969 by 2 parish priests. Largest homeless shelter in New England. It has built and designed over 1,200 units of housing, supportive services to homeless vets. Hopewell, developed and designed or founded in 1960s, predominantly serves foster care, is the largest non-government social service agency supporting our families in foster care, have developed housing for kids transitioning out. We have 750 kids a year that transition out of foster care in Massachusetts with nowhere to go. Often no supportive housing and no families. If we partnered these 3 organizations together, very quickly came up with, we could build 115 units. We could do this together. We could do this on all federal and state and city dollars that are available right now in the immediate, with available parcels of faith-based communities, specifically Catholic churches, came forward and sold us, I know you're selling don't sell, but we're saying sell your properties to us, or a long-term land lease. Great, do that too, right? But sold to us at fair market rate, by the way. We're not trying to take anything from the Archdiocese. It's fair market rate, right? Just give us the opportunity to do some fundraising for pre-development work, because that's the only philanthropic dollars these institutions or organizations need to develop this land. That and the courageous leadership and knowledge and understanding from our Catholic Church leaders or our faith-based communities. There's a massive knowledge gap around, we need to have for-profit entities developing this work. You can work with for-profit entities that also partner with nonprofit developers and provide affordable housing units and still live your mission. We need to be for-profit entities in order to access all the public dollars that are available that provide and will provide significant revenue to our Catholic organizations or our faith-based organizations and allow us to live our mission. With all that being said, we went to the Archdiocese of Boston and said, hey, here's 6 test sites. We can tell you right now you're not doing anything with these properties. They've been sitting vacant for almost a decade. Not only are they vacant, but you're spending a tremendous amount of money on snow removals or insurances or, the fix-its or what have you, right? And not serving, most of these are in communities that we've underserved for decades and decades. And what would that look like if we could take one of these sites, and we picked these sites very strategically that also had pastors, because we get it, local ownership, local politics, local. These pastors are saying, we want to do something for our communities there, and we want to live out our mission, and we want to be able to stay in this community and serve the residents here. So what could we do? And so we picked these 6 sites, and we said, what could we do with this Dorchester site? And it was actually, funny enough, just vacated after serving for 20 years as the housing for the Urban Catholic Teacher Corps, which is the ACE program out of Boston College, basically. It's the Urban Catholic Teacher Corps that was housing 28 kids. And BC said, we're leaving because, we just got a steal from the sisters over at Mount Alvernia that basically robbed them blind and took their property and have a beautiful rectory, right? Because that's what happens when we're not getting good advice and we're not treating each other with dignity and respect. And I love Boston College, but that's true, what happened, right? And so here we go, they've moved out, this is vacant. Those two other buildings had been vacant for 2 decades now. So, hey, as of right now, no zoning, no nada. What the city of Boston would let us do this immediately, right? 9 2-bedroom units. Okay, great. Well, what if we had a little tiny bit of zoning relief from the city? And we added on, bumped out and did a little bit of wider footprint, right? So we could do 9 2-bedrooms, 9 1-bedrooms, 4 studios. We got 22 units. Or a little bit more variance here. We could throw up another floor, right? Or throw up another floor and bump it out a little bit, right? So quickly you're getting to 42 units at one of these sites. And so what we're saying as an organization, or as a foundation that's been investing for a long, long time in the Catholic Church and believes deeply in our faith and in our community, is this is an opportunity to live out our mission, to serve the communities in which we have always served, right? We have always, as a Catholic institution, housed migrants, or housed first gens, or created affordable housing, or housed formerly trafficked individuals, right? This is what we do as a Catholic Church. We don't talk about it. We don't think about it, I think, very strategically. One of our greatest strengths is we sit on a tremendous amount of real estate. And we should repurpose that in a way that is relevant and provides revenue and inspiration to rebuild our church, to talk about what we do as an organization or an institution in a really thoughtful way. I want to just say, I want to end with, during all our research, I talked to a lot of different folks, and the Catholic Charities USA right now, and if you're not familiar with Brian Corbin, you know, we should be. Because Catholic Charities right now is actually talking with the Canon Law Society to come up with a guidebook on how to repurpose Catholic institutions, and how do we do that lives out our faith, right? That understands canon law and who owns what and what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. They're also looking for 10 dioceses around the country to do pilot programs, to gather a coalition of stakeholders that are interested in repurposing Catholic real estate or Catholic institutions to create housing. And the idea would be you would come together as a group of these 10 dioceses around the country. You would do 6 courses. You'd understand financing. You'd understand the theology of the buildings and of the assets that we have as a church. How do we repurpose them? And what does that look like to work together? And so I'm just going to end with, I think a lot of folks are interested in this idea. Yigby's have been around forever. I think that's sort of our Trojan horse to get to the Archdiocese to talk about it. I think there's a tremendous amount of assets and opportunity, and I think all we really need to do is think about politically our courage and our ability to think about things differently, and why are we here, and what does our Catholic faith want us to do, and how can we live that out to its greatest fulfillment. That's it.